Leather hit rain. A shoe left a wet arc across a marble plaza. Phones rose like birds. Cameras found a face in a flash. A woman in silk and confidence stepped back as an old man fell. He landed into the puddle like a secret. She laughed. The Ipui crowd recorded. Someone cheered. Someone gasped. The man did not curse. He did not shout. He stayed on the ground and watched her the way a judge watches a witness. The smile on his face was not surprise. It was a quiet, slow ache. In that single frame, two worlds met. In that single frame, a private life tilted toward ruin. The footage would travel farther than a taxi. It would land on a hand that had the power to stop her, and maybe to end her. Layla Morgan learned to remake herself from a single photograph. A cramped corridor, an open window, a mother folding shirts with hands that knew prayer better than applause. Childhood smelled of fried plantain and old detergent. There were teachers who said words like talent, and landlords who said words like move on. Layla learned every angle. She learned how to stand under lights. She learned how to speak to cameras as if they were mirrors. She learned to practice smiles until they felt like armor. She changed her surname at 21. She moved into glass towers and manors. She took a job in brand strategy and learned to polish reputations. She learned to hide the tremor behind perfect statements. She learned to never ask for help. She became a signature at fundraisers. She became the woman men put in photographs next to checks and speeches. She told herself she deserved it. She told herself the world had finally matched the promise she had always carried in private. Daniel Pierce built things that glittered on skylines. He built apps that made money feel invisible. He built a foundation that promised change. He kept his private life private. He kept one detail quieter than the rest. His father did not travel the stage. He did not take ribbon-cutting pictures. He had, for years, turned away from the spotlight and from the family name. Daniel loved Layla with a sure, steady sort of adoration. The kind men bring when they have seen a person claw toward something and then win it. Layla saw Daniel as proof. The ring he slipped on her finger during an autumn walk felt like a rival. She rehearsed speeches about doors opening. She rehearsed her wedding smile. She composed a future with corner offices and the shade of his name. She did not think about the old man she had once seen under the bridge. She did not think about the person with a crumpled cup 2 streets over who muttered to pigeons. She had learned to avoid the small discomforts that did not come with invitations. The old man had a bench he favored at the central station. He read with a torn newspaper, fed sour bread to the pigeons, and watched the city solve itself in small, repeating dramas. People called him Mr. Gray. People gave him coins with quick hands. He spoke rarely. When he did, his words landed like small stones in a quiet river. Some afternoons he rose and walked into the library and left with a heavy tote of books. There were no stories in the papers about him. He had an economy of dignity that made strangers feel ashamed when they compared their lives to his patients. On the day the shoe found him, he had asked nothing. He had only shifted to pass by a boutique window. The sunlight cut across the marble. Layla had been running late. Her heel had clipped his ankle by mistake. She had seen a wrinkle, a gray head, a slow step. She had decided, fast and silent, that there would be no touch. The camera angle recorded the decision as if it were a flash of wind. The plaza watched as a woman decided she was not responsible for a body that crossed her path. The old man watched as if he had already been waiting for the lesson. That evening, Layla had a private dinner planned at Daniel's apartment. An invite, she told herself, would confirm everything. She spent hours choosing a gown. The mirror gave her back a practiced face. There was a small, private hurry in her chest, the way there is when someone is about to take a photograph that matters. She did not know an image of the plaza had already been sent somewhere it could not be called back. She did not know that her small act had taken on a momentum outside her control. The man in gray dried himself with a napkin and walked toward the station steps. He looked at the city like someone counting stars. He did not seem afraid. He did not shout. He put his hand inside the pocket of his coat and touched something there. A photograph, perhaps, or nothing at all. He walked on. The city continued like a machine. The footage, however, did not stop. The video traveled. It was a simple file. 20 seconds. A shoe. A man. A laugh. It popped like a splinter across timelines. A stranger uploaded it first. The stranger wrote a short sentence. Then accounts with larger numbers clicked share. Then someone with more reach posted it with a caption that invited outrage. Notifications grew like small fires. At first, the noise was a background crackle. People discussed tone. They debated context. They debated whether someone could judge a person from one careless second. Then an old clip surfaced. A junior staffer recorded on his phone a year-old meeting where Layla had scolded a janitor for leaving a trash bin in the wrong place. Another clip showed a voicemail, private and raw, where she had dismissed an unpaid intern with a laugh that did not hold apology. The pieces found each other. Patterns are easy to assemble once someone begins to look. Daniel saw the footage in his office window, while rain traced the skyline. He watched the shoe arc in slow motion. He watched the man fall. He watched Layla stand. Daniel froze. There was a small coldness, a flinch in him that did not come from the image itself, but from the question lodged in his chest. Who was this woman he had promised to marry? How had he missed the edges? At the company, boards called. Corporate counsel typed careful notes. The foundation sent a brief statement. The team that managed reputation met in a room with glass walls, and the kind of silence reserved for urgent things. Layla called her publicist. The publicist gave her talking points. The talking points had no heart. Layla rehearsed a video that would sound like no one's apology. Measured, guarded, legal. She asked for control. Control felt like safety. Then something else broke. A private message from someone close moved like a knife. A friend who had once been her armor texted a recording of Layla at a rooftop party, heard saying that the poor should know their place in a drunken half-joke. The friend said the recording proved Layla's pattern, and then posted it with the caption, "Truth." The friend did not answer calls after that. Online, strangers called for consequences. Protesters gathered outside the brands that carried Layla's face. Petition signatures climbed. Hashtags multiplied. Sponsors asked whether the partnership fit their values. The phone that had once rung with restaurant reservations and brand collabs now filled with silent widgets. Message after message. Layla slept for 2 hours, across 3 nights, and each time woke to the same chorus. A second twist arrived from an unexpected direction. An investigative blogger, hungry for clicks, dug into Layla's school records. They found a different name. They found a different address. That post framed her reinvention as a theater of denial. Comments went cruel. People in the old neighborhood posted photos of a teenage girl with borrowed shoes and a dusty uniform. The internet had a hunger for start-to-finish narratives. It found one. Layla pushed back. She called her mother. Her mother answered in 3 words and hung up. She called Daniel. He asked to come home. They argued for 5 minutes that felt like an hour. He held up his hand and said he needed quiet. He said he had to think. The photo of the shoe kept replaying, in the hollow between them. Meanwhile, the old man moved quietly through that turbulence like a fixed small island. He received no calls. He was a person the media had written about only as a victim. Someone from a shelter saw him and asked whether he wanted to speak. He declined. He had no interest in the noise. He kept reading. He kept feeding pigeons. Rumors bloomed around him. Some said he was unknown. Some said he was merely unfortunate. No one guessed the truth under the coat. The third twist took its time. A former business associate of Daniel's father appeared in a thread with a simple claim: Edmund Pierce has been seen in low places. That claim became a breadcrumb. A reporter followed. An amateur sleuth cross-checked old company photos and a faded portrait. The portrait showed a young man with a laugh shaped by factories and harnesses. The sleuth looked at the portrait and then the man on the bench. The two faces matched in the jawline and in the eyes. The reporter sent an email that wondered if the old man was, by blood and by history, connected to the very family that now owned the company punked by the scandal. Questions became a different kind of pressure. Daniel, at his desk, read the emails from the reporter. He sat in the glass light and dialed a number he had not used in years. He asked a question he had avoided since childhood. The answer arrived like a weight. His voice on the other side was thin with something that had lived in it for too long. "You know him," the voice said. "You always knew him. You just never called." A new clip appeared that evening. Someone had filmed the old man leaving the plaza after the shoe. He walked into traffic and into a taxi that had no name on the door. He arrived at a brownstone, with a discreet bell. The brownstone door opened, and a woman in a simple scarf stepped down to meet him. For a second, the camera shook. Then it stopped. The world wanted a headline. But what the world did not yet have was why the man had been there at that precise moment. Why had he been in the plaza? Why had he been wearing a coat that smelled of old books and rain? Layla watched the incoming storm like a person watching an eclipse. Each new beam revealed a different face of herself. A former assistant left a letter at the office desk with a list of complaints. A charity that had once invited her rescinded a support letter. The board that had called for calm now asked for statements. The city felt like a room where people whispered about the next move. Layla's next move was to go to the one place she had told herself she would never visit again, the old neighborhood where her mother still lived. She arrived and stood at the edge of a courtyard that smelled of exhaust and stew. Her phone buzzed with messages she did not open. She walked past the shop where she had first learned to line up numbers on a register. She paused at a window that had held her reflection once and then swallowed her. The guilt inside her was not loud. It was a steady pressure. She decided in that moment to try a different sound. She would apologize. She would make amends. She would rebuild. It felt like a small and uncertain plan. It felt like nothing against the swell of public anger. But it was the only plan she had. Then, at the compound where Daniel lived, an assistant slid a tablet onto his desk. The screen showed a single message. It read, simply, "Your father wants to meet. Tonight." Daniel's hand tightened. He had not expected his father to arrive anywhere, let alone in a world that was now so raw with accusation. He wondered if the meeting would bring ruin or repair. He wondered which his father would choose. The old man, that evening, sat in the back of a small church and listened to strangers sing. He did not know how viral storms worked. He only knew people. He had watched a city that had once celebrated his name bury it in rumors. He had watched the son he loved walk away from a house that had once been his. He had watched the city forget how to notice small things. He had also watched a woman, in silk and in haste, decide not to touch a hand. He had felt the force of that refusal in his bones. Soon, the house that had always kept its blinds drawn would open its doors. The man in the coat would walk through. The woman in the gown would sit across. The city would hold its breath. The dinner was not announced. It was small. The room smelled of orange peel and old wood. The table was a little too long for the number of people who sat there. Layla entered with an air that tried to steady itself. Her shoes made a small sound on the marble. The old man was already in the room, folded like a presence into a corner chair. He looked like a man who had learned how to wait. Daniel stood between them, the space of a man who had kept both places in his chest. The tablet on the table still showed the video of the plaza. The light from the window kissed the image like a verdict. No one spoke. There was a quiet that felt like an accusation. Layla felt the air thicken. She thought of excuses. She thought of damage control. She had rehearsed lines in a mirror that was no longer kind. She thought of the way her mother had once kissed the top of her head and said, "Remember who you are." The words felt distant now. Then the old man raised his hand. He did not shout. He did not demand reparation. He pushed his sleeve back and showed a thin, folded photograph. The photograph had the kind of grain paper earns after decades. On it, a young man sat on a factory floor, hair unstyled, fists blackened and proud. The young man looked like someone who had once made a city move. It was a man with the same jaw as the one in the chair. Layla realized in a slow, crushing way that the man before her wore a history she had not been given. The photograph spoke of names that had been handed down with both privilege and pain. She understood then that the man she had kicked was not a stranger. He was a root the city had once fed on. He was a man with the power to unravel the scaffolding of her future. Daniel's voice moved, and it was not angry. It was very soft. He stood, and for the first time in their relationship, he did not take the easy path. He did not ask for promises. He did not reach for a hello. He said only that character could not be built from selective seeing. He said that a promise needed more than a ring. It needed truth. He set the ring down on the table, and it made a small, bright sound on the wood. Layla's chest felt hollow. She could name 10 ways to defend herself. She could say that a moment was not a life. She could call on a publicist and a legal team and a media buy. But none of that could fill the thin, empty place Daniel's hand left behind when it removed. The ring. The cameras later called it a public break. The media called it a scandal wrapped in family drama. The feeds spun versions and memes. The tabloids called it karma. Lawyers wrote and called. Layla watched the ring on the table like someone watching a distant storm approach. Then a second blow came like a thinner, harder wind. The company that had given her a voice pulled an endorsement from her portfolio. A client withdrew. A friend announced from a post that they could no longer be associated. The boards that had once opened doors now closed them. The world in which she had learned to be seen began to look like a place that did not want her there anymore. But the hardest thing was not loss. The hardest thing was a silent, private memory that rose like smoke. Layla remembered the face of the man she had struck. She remembered close, for the first time, how his eyes had not been humiliated. They had been steady. They had the kind of gaze that has seen both hunger and wealth and decided to keep neither. In the days that followed the dinner, someone leaked an old ledger. It contained names and small notes about a foundation that had helped neighborhoods when factories closed. It contained a note addressed to a young woman whose surname matched Layla's mother's maiden name. The line suggested a quiet payment. The internet chewed on that like a dog on a bone. For Layla, a private memory burst open. She remembered a check years before, a small one, and a woman who had used that money to fix a roof before winter. Her mother had never told her details. Layla had never known who had come to the house then and left unannounced. There was regret now that had the tang of iron. It is one thing to lose a public life. It is another to understand you had once traded your dignity for the illusion of a different name. The old man, who could have used the scandal to raise his voice, chose instead to sit with the quiet that had been his life for decades. He watched the city speak and did not let it turn his bones. In a final public moment, the old man agreed to speak to a small room of reporters. He walked slowly to the podium. He did not flaunt identity. He did not parade apology. He said something that made reporters shift in their seats. He said that humility is not the same as erased dignity. He said that apologies must grow from action, not from pixels. He spoke of names, of factories, of lunches shared with people who had less and gave more. He spoke, and his voice did not need to be loud. It had the kind of deep, patient clarity that settles a room. Layla watched the news from a bench in a park. The ring was gone from her finger. Her phone held only a few messages now. She had no job offers. She had a few friends stay, the ones who had seen the girl she used to be. The rest had moved like weather. She felt small, but not like she had felt before. Small felt honest. The climax did not offer a single tidy punishment. It offered jagged consequence and a carved open truth. A woman had kicked a man. The city would choose what to do with that fact. The man, the father, had chosen an answer that cut deeper than shame. He had chosen to speak of repair. He had chosen to teach rather than to destroy. That choice would change the shape of the aftermath. After the cameras left, the city continued. Layla returned to the apartment she had once decorated to impress. It was too large for a person who did not sleep well. She kept the curtains drawn for a long week, not because she was hiding, but because the face in the window, her face, reflected and harsh, demanded time. She stopped pretending to be untouchable. She started to notice small things she had once ignored. A cracked stair in her building, a neighbor who carried groceries with hands that trembled, a child who ran with a basketball scuffed at the edges. She took a bus to places she once left behind. She sat in community rooms and listened. She watched a shelter volunteer set up plates and count rice with care. She volunteered to sweep floors without announcing it. At first, she did it like someone learning a foreign language. Her hands were clumsy with brooms. People watched, suspicious, because the internet had taught them how the rich apologize. But after a month or two, the suspicion eased. She began to show up on the days when she did not expect applause. Slowly, a pattern emerged. She was not seeking to become famous for good deeds. She wanted the difficult work, the kind that required no cameras, the kind that asked one to be present when it was easier not to be. A woman at the shelter said once, quietly, "You stayed." Those words later kept her from running. Daniel did not return the ring. He did not seek headlines either. He wrote an op-ed 1 month later about public accountability and private change. He spoke of a father who had chosen anonymity to learn. He spoke of his own mistakes in turning a blind eye to small cruelties. In the column, he did not invite Layla back. He did not offer a path for reconciliation. He offered reflection, which is sometimes more honest. The old man, whose name was Edmund Pierce, visited neighborhoods in silence. He met people without the weight of his surname. He acted in ways that surprised those who had known him in the boardrooms. He gave small gifts without announcement. He funded a program for workers who had lost jobs when factories closed. He funded a small scholarship with the name of a girl he had once helped without telling her. The scholarship was for young women in neighborhoods that had not had access to internships. He did not tie his charity to Layla's name. One afternoon, months after the shoe and the plaque of public shame, Layla found an envelope on her table. Inside was a plain card and a line written in handwriting that had been careful for years. "For the center," it said. "For the kids who asked for courts next to their school." No signature, no ceremony. Layla sat with the card and felt a sudden, complex grief. She understood, with the clarity of someone whose life had been stripped, that the world did not owe her restoration. It owed her nothing. The kindness she had been given once had been anonymous, like a thread sewn into a hem. The forgiveness she needed took a different shape. It arrived in small, almost invisible acts of work. She named the center for a teacher who had once given her a battered notebook. It opened with 2 cracked hoops and a faded net. Children came with shirts that did not match. They laughed, and their laughter sounded like a promise. Layla coached them. Sometimes she taught them how to tie a shoe. The first time a boy scored a clean basket and looked back to show his father, Layla cried. No camera caught it. No sponsor posted it. It was a small redemptive filament. It grew. The internet moved on, as it always does. New outrages took its place. New hashtags flew. But the small gym on the corner became steady. Parents began to leave coats for others. A teacher donated old books. The community kept noticing in the way a patient person notices rain. Edmund Pierce did not return to the public stage in a grand gesture. He visited quietly. Once he stood at the edge of the court and watched the kids practice free throws. He left without fanfare. Layla found a note in the club mailbox with a new donation and a line that read, "For the stubborn ones who try." Months later, a reporter asked in a column whether the city had learned anything from the scandal. She wrote about the viral moment and about the slow work that followed. The piece ended with a sentence that echoed around small rooms and big ones alike. Kindness is not a status. It is an action when no one is watching. Layla thought about that line often. She thought about the old man on the bench. She thought about the instant she had refused to touch a hand. She thought about the photograph in the dinner room and the check that had once fixed her mother's roof. She let those memories sit, like stones. They were hard, but they were honest. The moral did not come as retribution. It came as a reframing. Wealth had been present in the life of the man she had kicked. Wealth did not excuse her. In the end, she did not get her engagement back. She did not regain the public roles she had once worn like costumes. She did something harder. She became a person other people could count on. The last image lingers like a shot. Layla, standing at the edge of a dim court. The net is old, and the paint is flaking, but the ball arcs clean and true. Edmund Pierce sits 2 rows back, his scarf neat, his face unreadable but attentive. A child runs to him for a high five. He offers it with a slow, steady hand. The camera would record nothing of consequence. It catches only the ordinary. My dear, this wasn't just a story. It was a reminder that humanity is above everything. Want to hear more unforgettable stories like this? Then hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next one. If a shoe can change a life in a blink, then a hand can change one too. If the world can judge a person in 20 seconds, who will stand to teach us patience? If the man you scorn could be wearing a crown you cannot see, would you bend to help him any?